Welcome to The Whole Itself Remains. I'm your host, Todd, and you're listening to CJMP Co-op Radio 90.1 FM, broadcasting from the Cathet region on the beautiful Sunshine Coast of British Columbia on the traditional territory of the Common People. The show is also available on YouTube and your favorite podcasting platform. So for this episode, I'm going to be reviewing some very recent research that suggests a worrisome link between the chronic use of the gabapentinoids, including gabapentin and pregabalin, and an increased risk of dementia. This class of drugs is frequently prescribed for pain management, and so given this emergent risk, I'm going to be sharing some natural pain management interventions, including a review of dietary and lifestyle measures, and then following this, my interview with Appalachian herbalist Phyllis D. So I came across this article entitled Gabapentin Use for Back Pain Linked to Higher Risk of Dementia. I read the article and then I read the study upon which the article was based, and it confirmed some of the concerns that I've had with gabapentinoids for some time. So what are the gabapentinoids? Well, this includes gabapentin such as Neurontin, as well as pregabalin, for example, Lyrica. They were developed as anti-seizure drugs. They're now widely used also for neuropathic and chronic pain. They're marketed to doctors and patients primarily as a safer alternative to opioids. They're also prescribed off-label for a number of different conditions, including back pain, fibromyalgia, restless leg syndrome, anxiety, insomnia, even hot flashes. It works by binding to the alpha-2 delta-1 subunit of voltage-gated calcium channels. What this means is that it lowers the release of excitatory neurotransmitters in the brain, like glutamate, substance P, and norepinephrine, so it reduces neuronal excitability. It has a number of problematic side effects, though. This includes sedation, dizziness, ataxia, which means like stumbling gait, cognitive impairment, edema, and risk of dependency, particularly when used with opioids and or benzodiazepines. From 2009 to 2016, prescriptions for gabapentinoids have increased by over 300%, with about 10% of chronic pain patients using them on a regular basis. Now, as I mentioned, there is growing evidence linking long-term use of gabapentin and pregabalin to increased dementia risk. In the present study published in the British Medical Journal, researchers analyzed the records of 26,000 adult Americans regularly taking gabapentin for chronic pain, finding that using gabapentin for at least 6 months was linked to a 30% higher risk of dementia and an 85% higher risk of mild cognitive impairment, the effect being strongest in adults aged 35 to 64, with this risk increasing with duration of use. This aligns with the results of an earlier 2023 study of 200,000 adults in Taiwan that found a 45% higher risk of dementia, the strongest effect seen in adults under the age of 50, who are about 3 times more likely to develop dementia than non-users. And this connection between gabapentin and dementia risk has also been explored in animal research, showing that gabapentin causes memory and learning deficits and the accumulation of tau protein, which is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease, as well as the suppression of a key neuroprotective enzyme called SIRT1. While not proof of causation, these findings demonstrate that there should be concern over chronic use, particularly among younger adults and off-label users. So there's lots of reasons to reconsider gabapentinoids. There's limited benefit for most types of chronic pain. It works mainly for neuropathic pain, and yet it's prescribed off-label for conditions such as back pain, fibromyalgia, or anxiety, where the evidence of benefit is weak. It causes fatigue, imbalance, and mental fog. It has many side effects such as sleepiness, dizziness, poor coordination, and slowed thinking, which can impair things like driving, work, or just daily functioning. There is a significant risk of dependency and withdrawal. There are increasing reports, for example, of misuse, tolerance, and withdrawal, and this has prompted regulatory reclassification in some countries. Suddenly stopping gabapentinoids can have a number of negative side effects, such as anxiety, sweating, tremors, nausea, and rebound pain, and thus getting off of gabapentinoids is tricky. It requires a careful and slow taper. There's also issues with kidney function, as gabapentinoids are cleared primarily through the kidneys, and so older adults or those with reduced kidney function can develop problems such as toxicity, confusion, or sedation, even at regular normal doses. So given these risks, it's important to look at alternatives to the gabapentinoids and the idea that the goal of pain management is really just a matter of suppressing sensory pathways. Across the different systems of traditional medicine, chronic pain is thought to arise from stagnation and depletion. It's a failure of metabolic clearance, circulation, and repair, and requires therapies that clear obstruction, reduce inflammation, and restore vitality. In Ayurveda, the root cause is often traced to ama. It literally means undigested food, but more broadly refers to metabolic waste or any type of endotoxin like residue. It accumulates and obstructs the channels of the body, or shotamsi, and drives the increase and vitiation of the doshaha. This includes kapha. When kapha is increased, it results in congestion and stiffness. This then results in the increase and vitiation of pitta. This results in acute inflammation and pain. This then results in the increase and vitiation of vata, which translates to degeneration and neuropathic pain. In Chinese medicine, it's viewed in much the same way. The words and semantics are different, but the basic understanding is the same. This type of chronic pain syndrome is described as a Bi-Jung syndrome, or painful obstruction syndrome. It's caused by external pathogenic factors such as wind, cold, damp, and heat. Like ama, it accumulates in the channels and joints and leads to the blockage of qi, or energy, as well as blood. Likewise, in physiomedicalism, pain is described as an obstruction to the vital force, arising from the accumulation of morbid wastes. This drives the irritation or hyperactivity of the nervous system, resulting in inflammation and pain, which long-term leads to a vital deficiency, characterized by impaired innervation, poor circulation, degeneration, and chronic pain. So from a holistic perspective, we address chronic pain and neuropathic dysfunction by restoring vital circulation, metabolic balance, and nervous integrity, rather than just suppressing sensory pathways. And this involves dietary and lifestyle measures, as well as a plethora of medicinal and key nutritional supplements. Now, given the complexity and the limitations of time, I can't fully elaborate all these different measures, but I will share with you a few important dietary and lifestyle measures that can go a long way to resolving this underlying dynamic of chronic pain. So, with respect to nutrition, it's important, vitally important, to emphasize an anti-inflammatory whole food diet, emphasizing plant foods such as vegetables and half-sweet fruits, along with culinary herbs and spices, high-quality fats and proteins, and reduce or even eliminate the consumption of refined carbohydrates such as white flour and sugar, alcohol, and industrial oils. All of these promote glycation and neuroinflammation. Make sure to include plenty of sulfur-rich foods in your diet. This includes garlic, onions, and brassicas. These are essential for the repletion of glutathione. This is the body's primary intracellular antioxidant that is often depleted in chronic pain. And then ensure adequate hydration and the consumption of electrolytes. These are essential to support neurotransmission and support detoxification. With respect to lifestyle interventions, there's a whole bunch of things you can do to improve circulation and to reduce chronic pain. This includes regular low-impact exercise such as walking, swimming, cycling, etc. Even something like calisthenics, maybe 10 to 15 minutes a day, performed 4 to 5 times a week. Don't overdo it, but regular exercise like this is essential to enhance circulation, to prevent deconditioning, and also to prevent sarcopenia. This is muscle loss with aging. Breathwork, meditation, yoga, qigong, these are also really important to enhance vagal tone and shift someone out of a state of fight or flight or sympathetic stress back into autonomic balance. That will also help with chronic pain. And then also heat therapy. Remember that pain syndromes relate to obstruction, and this typically relates to coldness. So heat can be very helpful here. It could include something like sauna or maybe hydrotherapy. Even a simple Epsom salt bath can be very effective. It improves circulation, and then with respect to the Epsom salt bath, it's going to help with the uptake of magnesium, which has pain relieving and antispasmodic properties. And then lastly, make sure that you follow a consistent sleep schedule, getting somewhere between 6.5 and 7.5 hours of sleep each night. This is essential to support neurogenesis and neurotransmitter balance. Next up, my interview with Appalachian herbalist Phyllis D. So Phyllis is a 4th-generation herbalist and healer. She has studied and worked with herbs, foods, and other healing techniques for over 30 years. She is traditionally trained in the Southern Folk Medicine School with lessons from her grandmother as well as Tommie Bass, a renowned Southern herbalist. Phyllis has a master's degree from the University of Alabama in Health Studies, Nutrition, and Healthcare. She has taught continuing education classes for allied healthcare professionals and is director of the Appalachian Center for Natural Health and author of Southern Folk Medicine, Healing Traditions from Appalachian Fields and Forests. Hi, Phyllis.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing good. I'm doing well
Excellent.
too.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for meeting with me today. I'm
Oh,
really
you're
looking forward
welcome.
to our conversation. You're someone that I've had admired from a distance for quite some time. I think that there's a lot of interesting parallels, at least in terms of our perspectives on things, and unsurprisingly, I think because we're both herbalists, but also because of the similarity between the Appalachian tradition that you practice and then my own understanding of Ayurveda. And I'm sure you have also a really good understanding of Ayurveda. So you must have seen that kind of that synergy or that similarity. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. And also with TCM. I mean, I've seen
yeah,
it with TCM too.
right.
Yeah. So I think any indigenous system, and technically Ayurveda is an indigenous system,
Yeah,
and so is TCM, that any indigenous system that was developed on the land, with nature, are going to
yeah.
have some similarities. I mean, how could they not?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's kind of hardwired into our sort of preconceptual relationship with the earth, right? Like all the intellectualism that exists, it exists before that, right? It's
Right.
just hardwired into our nervous system. The way the seasons change, uh,
Yes.
how tastes affect our bodies and the physical
Yes.
responses. It's all hardwired, so it's just a matter of like putting some words to it. But
Yeah, the vocabulary. The
yeah, and that's what,
vocabulary is different, but
yes, the semantics are different, but the base understanding. So that's
totally the same.
so wonderful. So yeah, I'm really stoked to be talking with you today. And I've been starting things off this season by asking my interview guests for their perspectives on holism. Like I want to get into some more meatier topics with you, but I'm just sort of curious, what does holism mean to you? Like what is your kind of working understanding of that?
Of mind, body, spirit,
Hmm.
that kind of holism, but also not excluding the earth and our connection to the earth,
Right,
because that is another aspect of holism.
right,
And not excluding our relationship with each other
right,
also. That's another aspect of holism. And then not excluding our relationship with the other things that live on the earth,
right.
like the plants, obviously, but also the animals, and all things that are connected and were born on the same third rock from the sun that we were.
Hmm.
That's also a part of holism. So as above,
Yes.
so below. So I include all of it.
Yeah,
But
that's
that was in my upbringing. That was in my teachings also.
well, yeah, that's I'm kind of curious because people arrive at this perspective on holism in different ways. I don't have that deep, familial heritage in herbal medicine. I'm in my family lineage. I'm the first one, I think. But you have this deep calling that extends back into, your DNA, right? So
Yeah.
I'm wondering what brought you into alignment with this perspective on holism. Was it a product of simply that, or was it also the way in which, you're a Westerner like me, and we live in this reductionist culture dominated by modern medicine and the scientific thinking, which I think, you and I have a healthy respect for.
Yes.
But obviously, the reductionism means that we separate the world into little parts and don't really see the whole. So, is it an experience that you had, or is it informed by your own familial tradition? I'm just kind of curious how you came to this.
A little of both, because I didn't come to reductionism until much later
Okay,
in
okay.
my career in life. So I started out with a more community holism. We're all connected. If it rains, we can't get the cotton in. If it, if they, because both my grandparents, one of my grandparents on my mama's side was a sharecropper, and so cotton was it. If there was no cotton crop, then there's no money for the year. And then on my right. So I grew up in the cotton fields also,
Oh,
picking cotton. And so he raised cotton and corn, and he also raised dogs. And he was called Doc, was his nickname, because he was like a lay veterinarian, because there weren't really any veterinarians. So I used to follow around and help him. But also
no.
on my dad's side of the family were the wildcrafters, the ginseng hunters, uh, the gardeners, the fishermen. In my mama's side were the hunters. And so it was like, if you didn't make a living off the land, you didn't survive. There was right. There were no jobs and no
Right.
survival without that connection to the land, to the weather, to the wind, to the sun, because we had to be in it all the time. So we had to have this other understanding of it.
Right. And I mean, in other situations, you see folks where they've been forced into a position to have this kind of extractive mentality, right? And I'm sure you've come across it. But was it something different about your family lineage? Maybe the fact that folks were interacting more deeply with nature and were reliant and dependent upon it, like wild harvesting harvesting of wild ginseng.
Right.
So they needed to pay attention to the subtle
Right.
signs. They need to pay attention to the dynamics of seasonal change. And from that, perhaps had a healthier respect for the natural environment. But I'm just curious how you contrast that with, say, other perspectives where it's more of an extractive mindset, just from a survival
Right.
perspective.
Right. So it was not just my family, it was the whole community. It was like hundreds of people all around because it was poverty, Southern Appalachia.
Right.
So this was the common language of everybody I knew,
Right.
and all the community around me. So it was kind of, yes, in my DNA, but it was, also in the just the ability of eating every single day, also included that. And it wasn't until, oh, I was probably in my mid to late 20s that on my own I started like checking out books from the library to study about science.
Mm,
Because during my high school years I was funneled into the non-college route because my family was
uh,
so poor.
right.
So I didn't have the math, I didn't have the science, I didn't have any of that, right? Because I was viewed as, a poverty person that was going to end up working in agriculture or something, right?
Right.
But so I started studying on my own. So I came to science later, on my own. But then I, also decided I'm going to go to college. I was a single mom, two kids. I went to college full time and worked three part-time jobs and got my degree. And then later I was like, I'm going to get my master's and, got a master's and health studies, health education, and nutrition and healthcare. So these were things, the science I came to on my own, but I did not see them as mutually exclusive. So that's maybe the difference. I don't see them as separate or mutually exclusive. It's just a different vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. And I think it's truly informed by the fact that you're already rooted in this, lack of better words, holistic paradigm. And you're kind of layering on the science afterwards in some ways to help better articulate or understand or
Yes.
deepen this sort of holistic perspective. My experience is a little bit different. Because I don't have this heritage that you had, I feel like some of my interest in holism is reactive. It's kind of like I looked at the world and it's like, this
Ah,
doesn't make any sense to me.
gotcha.
Right. And so then
Right.
it's like, there's got to be something like a deeper understanding or explanation for what is.
Ah,
I'm curious, like, given the challenges balancing those different considerations and with respect to the folks that you work with, because you're having to deal with modern media and all these other different psychosocial influences, what kind of challenges do you experience in fostering this holistic perspective in, for example, in your students, but also especially in your patients?
well, in my clients, it depends on which set of clients there are,
Okay.
because for, quite some time, I've had an office and see clients in Huntsville, which is multinational, super science, NASA's there. We're going to send the man to the moon. Google's there. Everybody's there. I mean, it's like the new little Silicon Valley for space flight and industry. So so some of my first clients were rocket scientists. So having this other language just helped this vocabulary, because a lot of them were German and had come over with Wernher von Braun, at the end of World War II, but they had grown up with herbs. Because so
Oh,
yeah, because Hitler was an herbalist. He
okay.
was,
He
yes,
was a
I
vegetarian
know.
too. He loved animals,
I'm
apparently, I heard.
Yeah, he loved animals. He was a vegetarian. He was into astrology, and he thought everybody should be healed with herbs. So all these Germans came over, and they were all into herbs. And I'm the herbalist in the town, right? With qualifications from their perspective,
Mm.
but they're talking a very scientific language, and so they want you. So that was the vocabulary. But then my other clients are like chicken farmers and truck drivers and roofers and construction workers and mamas and little kids,
Mm.
and that is a different language. So that's like, you know, my Southern country language, but
Yeah.
they're not, they're just different vocabularies.
Right.
The underpinnings are exactly the same. So I've just explained things in a different vocabulary to each one.
Okay. And do you encounter any issues in trying to sort of articulate this holistic perspective? I mean, people are always looking for that quick fix, like I've got this
Uh,
particular health issue. I just want a herb to fix that. So
right,
how do you, because we know that, herbs certainly can be effective, but there's so much more behind that. We have to,
right,
ascertain the cause. The cause isn't the absence of taking the herb, there's something else. So
right.
how do you connect to that knowledge and express that to your patients?
Oh, I say things like, it took you a while to get this way. It's going to
Mhm.
take you a while to get over it. And don't wait till you're about dead before you come back to see me. Or, if you wait too long, they're going to nail the lid down on your coffin and then it's going to be too, I mean, so I use kind of like the vocabulary that's here
Right.
that people already understand.
Right.
But it's important for people to do get the idea, and a lot of them do, because a lot of my clients don't want to go to the doctor. They avoid the doctor. Uh, that's not their first. I mean, some of them, yeah. Some of my clients, they've been to the doctor, they didn't get help. Now they're going to come and figure out what's going on. But then some of them are like, I'm not going to the doctor at all. Right. So
Why would that be? Why would they not go? Is it because they can't afford it or?
some of them can't afford it, and
Mhm.
some of them are just totally conspiracy theory paranoid about conventional medicine,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that? Because like I think my perspective on things has changed over the last 30 years. I think I had a much more intuitive, instinctual approach, and I don't think it
Mhm.
was conspiracy minded per se, but I had a lot of skepticism, and I still do, of
Right,
course, and I spend a lot of my time with my patients, helping them figure out what protocol they're on and try to, if they want to substitute different herbal products or supplements for the drugs that they might be taking.
right.
But I kind of lost some of the sort of reactiveness that I had when I was
Yeah,
younger.
yeah.
And I'm just wondering how that's evolved for you.
I still have a bit of that, but I
Okay.
know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I also, say to my clients, if you don't want to take the medicine, that's up to you. But one of the things that doctors can do is run tests. And so why don't you go get
Yes.
these tests run and then bring me back the info, and I'll make my assessment to go along with it. And then we can look at both of these. And so I find that clients are more willing to go get the test done
Hmm.
and have that information, but they don't want the pharmaceuticals. Or
Right.
if they get a pharmaceutical, they want off of it as quickly as they can, or sometimes they want to do both at the same time.
Hmm.
So, and a lot of people here, it's a, of course, Christian community, and a lot of people here believe in prayer and faith healing. And, I'm just going to pray on it. And, and for a lot of my clients, herbs are Bible. And so
Huh?
there's that, well, you know, Genesis, we can just start with Genesis. So herbs are Bible, and so we'll just start there because, you pray and take your herbs, and yeah. So
Hmm.
there's that aspect, and that's always been there. I mean, that's
Right.
part, one of the reasons my family lasted so long as a herbalist in the community is because now there is the small kind of group that will go, well, herbs are witchcraft, but
Right.
they're a very small minority.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about this four generations that you've been a part of? What's the origin of your familial tradition in herbal medicine?
Well, it was on my daddy's side of the family.
Hmm.
And my grandmother was a midwife herbalist in a little community called Ruth. which was on the mountain over Catawba Valley, and her family was from Catawba Valley. My other, let me say, her mother-in-law would be my great grandmother, but not direct lineage, was herbalist midwife, and her
Mhm.
mother had been an herbalist midwife. So all the way back to the Civil War, on my daddy's side of the family, there'd been an herbalist midwife. And just recently, someone contacted me and she said, I'm 92 years old and I was the last baby your great grandmother delivered.
Wow.
And she sent me and she signed my birth certificate. So she sent me on my cell phone a copy of her birth certificate with my great grandmother Ada's Light's name on it, you know. So I was like, yay, a paper trail. Because,
Nice.
because during this time period, the paper trail was what was written in the Bible, because the Bible was the official document. You didn't have to go register, you didn't have to turn in a birth certificate, but if you wrote it inside the Bible, it was considered official. And so
Really
yeah,
interesting.
legal, that's legal. And so most families just kept the family Bible genealogy written inside the Bible.
Just in the margins of the Bible, like.
No, there's actually in the older Bibles,
Uh-huh.
there's actually at the front of the Bible empty pages
Okay, yeah.
with genealogy written at the top. And this is where you put what babies came and what their names were and all that kind of stuff.
That's
So,
fascinating.
so like my mother never had a birth certificate. And when she went to get Social Security, she had the Bible with
Hmm.
her name written in it and her date of birth, but she also had to find some three people who were alive when she was born, which was a little tricky considering she was 65 and she had to find three people still alive that said, oh, I knew her when she was little, to be able to get a birth certificate then to get Social Security. So
Interesting.
not a lot of documentation here in that time period.
Yeah, no, I don't imagine that's the case. And where did your family hail from originally? Like somebody came from the UK somewhere?
My grandmother's family, because she was part native, so her
Oh,
family had been here for literally probably thousands of years. She was
right.
part Creek. I mean, if ancestry on my dad's side of the family. And she had two sisters. Well, no, she had two sisters and three brothers, but her mother um, was three quarters Creek.
Okay.
So that side of the family had been here a long time.
Yes.
Uh, which is where I get these cheekbones. Uh, but on my mom's side of the family was the Creek. I mean, the Cherokee.
Okay.
And my great grandmother was Cherokee. So I'm actually card carrying state tribe, Cherokee tribe.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
yeah. So, because I can take my lineage back to the Trail of Tears,
Oh,
had two ancestors on the Trail of Tears.
wow.
Yeah.
So then, as part of this familial tradition, then you can claim to some extent some indigenous knowledge. So does
Yes.
that? But it's interesting how that's been probably modified by,
The Southern
what?
culture and
Yeah,
urbanization. Yeah,
yeah.
totally, totally.
So,
You
but
know,
has that been kind of like just like whitewashed, like a better
not
word?
totally, because it's still isolation, it's still poverty. There still
Right.
wasn't a lot of interaction with kind of the outside world.
Hmm.
Plant use, I know uses of plants that sometimes I don't even see in books because that
Right.
I was taught that. So plant use, I would say very indigenous.
Right.
And when I say very indigenous, probably the most indigenous knowledge that came through.
Wow.
Customs, you know, totally whitewashed. So like my grandmother, she got the really dark native skin
Hmm.
and she would wear a hat like this big.
Hmm.
And so her face wouldn't get darker because when she was growing up, they would come and get you and take you away and send you someplace, you
Just
know,
on your skin color.
just on your skin color, right? My dad was so dark, I didn't even look like his child,
Right.
right? I mean, my dad looked full blood, yeah. Even though he wasn't, he looked it. And so did all his brothers. Um, you know, so
Interesting.
it's just, but customs, we just now go, this is Southern. This is this part of the Southern culture,
Right.
right?
Yeah, your story, it just reminds me of some of the stories I've heard of folks that have been trained in the Ayurveda tradition, especially through the Gurukula method, where it's very much an in-family tradition where, of course, it's a little formal in the sense that they have to learn like Sanskrit first, but once they
Mm,
do, they start learning the classical texts. And back then, of course, they had to memorize everything, which continuously blows me away. But
right.
they started to practice at a relatively early age after getting the basics. And I'm wondering, like, in your own experience, like, when did you start working with people? And how did you do
I
it? Was
was
it under
probably
supervision?
19 when I started working with people, and my grandmother had died then. So people that used to come see her just started coming to see me.
Well,
Oh, that was
what,
that's
what what kind of stuff were you seeing? I mean, I mean, at 19
oh
years old, I can't imagine like you're responsible for this person's health. Like,
yeah. One of my very first clients, and I am never going to forget. He came to me, and he said, "I can't hold my water," and so then I'm like, what's going on? Do you know the reason you can't hold your water?
mhm.
And he had had his prostate operated on,
Oh,
and he was not able to control urination.
mhm.
So that was like, I mean, that's a big thing to start out early in
Yeah.
your practice with, right? And then they're like my second client came and because I just saw people around my kitchen table
Mhm.
and they just came because they knew my family and like I was just the next in line. And this person came and said, I think I have sugar in the blood. And I went, okay. And I gave him a mason jar and showed him the bathroom. This person peed in the jar. We went outside. It was summer, hot
Mhm.
summer. I had a piece of sandstone like this big and I poured the pee on it and we stood there to wait to see if the ants came.
No way. That's exactly how they would traditionally do it in Ayurveda.
Okay, all those little like tricks is I got taught. Yeah, that's how we determined. Of course, you also smell of the pee.
Yeah.
Yeah, to see if it smelled sweet. But the ants came, and I was like, "Yeah, I guess you do if you've been to the doctor." So then we had a discussion. I recommended some herbs, and yeah, so those were my first two. My third client was end stage breast cancer and
Wow.
had been diagnosed 6 years before.
Okay.
Decided not to do chemo or radiation because they had given her 3 years with chemo and radiation, and she decided to do everything all natural. And it had been 6 years, but it moved to her liver. So
Hmm.
now she has liver cancer. So that one was just palliative care and just doing the best I could because
Yeah.
she got double breast cancer and liver cancer. So, my first clients were not cough, colds, and flus or
Right.
stomach aches. They were big stuff.
So yeah, some pretty heavy stuff there. And I'm sure it has evolved over time, but I'm just kind of curious, like what were you doing for like keeping records? Was it something you just kind of kept in your head? Did you
Yeah,
make notes?
no.
No.
Yeah, they could make notes if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And then I just kept the rest in my head.
Right. But that must have changed over time. Like
It did. It
yeah.
changed over time, and my practice got busier and
Hmm.
busier, and it was harder to remember everybody's name and what the situation was. So then I started keeping records.
So then so after you're kind of grounded in this tradition you inherited from your grandmother, where did you continue your training? Did you get some additional clinical training?
Just with Tommie Bass.
Okay. Can you tell me about that? Like who's Tommie Bass?
Oh, Tommie Bass lived an hour from me, up in the higher mountains, because I'm on
Hmm.
a mountain
Okay.
plateau, but he was in the higher mountains. And he was really a nationally known herbalist. I
Hmm.
mean, there was documentaries done about him and he just had clients all over the country. But I was with him as much as you could be with him. You just followed him around and he just talked kind of stuff for 3 or 4 years. And that was really interesting because he had become very disillusioned. So when he did his practice, he would take people out in the woods and say, "This is the plant. This is how you harvest it. Let's go over here, back over here to my shack. Let's cook it up. This is how you cook it up. And now you know how to do it."
Ah,
Right? and I'll take a donation because he didn't charge, but he would take a donation. And so then if people were like, I don't want to know what it looks like.
Right.
I don't want to know how to cook it up.
Yeah.
I just want you to give it to me, right?
Yeah.
And he almost quit practice over that.
Really?
Yeah, he did because it just blew his mind that people didn't want to take care of themselves, that they wanted somebody to take care of them for them. Um, so then he had to like think about it and he came to a different understanding because he had to go, well, times has changed.
Hmm.
People are working. They're not working in the fields anymore. They're working at a desk or they're working in a
Hmm.
factory, so he had to come to a different understanding. But he probably knew more herbs in the field than anybody I've ever met, including Seven Song. And Seven Song is a person I think knows a lot of herbs out in the wild, but I would say Tommie Bass. I mean, he never learned how to drive, right?
Hmm.
So you either had to take him somewhere or he had made himself a tall tricycle and he would go up and down the mountains on this tricycle. But you could be driving with him and he would go, up there about a quarter of a mile. You see that? And I'm like, no. He would like spot it that far away. Well, we need to stop up there and get that. But he had been trained from a very early age. His parents were immigrants from England, and both his mom and dad had been herbalists in England. So he had the old traditional English folk herbalism
Right.
that met Aunt Molly Kirby, the black midwife that lived at the foot of the mountain, and she'd gotten too old to gather herbs, and so she started teaching Tommie the local herbs if he would gather them for her. So he kind of blended those two traditions together, what his mom and his dad taught him, because they were still doing herbs in the community up there with kind of like this native indigenous black approach
Hmm.
that Aunt Molly taught him. So he married those two together. And
Hmm.
so I studied that with him for several years.
So so I mean, he wasn't a trained botanist, but you said he had an extensive knowledge, so he was able to kind of discriminate between really discrete characteristics and like, oh,
He
it's this,
was.
but he didn't have the language necessary to,
No, no, he could not tell you a single Latin name.
right?
He could not.
Or describe like the morphology of a plant per se. He would, it'd be interesting to hear his conversation with, say, someone like Seven Song to,
Yeah, he would go, well, you see this right here? You see this little flap of leaf right here? I
yeah,
mean, um, but he knew how to use the plants and he had been taught. He was very, very, very successful
yeah.
and had, I mean, Sunday after church, I would go there
Hmm.
um, to his place, and you drove into his place, and it was a long dirt driveway that had like woods on either side and like grass growing up in the middle of the dirt road, So it's like, and then you drove in, and you would think you were driving into a junkyard because there would be old appliances
Okay.
every, seriously everywhere. And that's what he did to make money is he worked on small appliances was his cash money. And bicycles, he worked on bicycles and there'd be toasters over here on the porch, there'd be toasters and there was a stove. And so it just like it was a junkyard. It was, but people drove up after church and they just sit in a line, they'd park and get out and they'd wait their turn to come up and talk to him.
And
Yeah,
it was by donation, so he
it
didn't
was
charge anything.
by, mm-mm, no.
So was he telling, and I'm just curious how it informed your practice too, but was he just primarily recommending herbs, or was he also telling people what to eat, how to live their life? Was
Yeah,
he referencing,
he did all of that.
really?
Yeah, I would say he would say you need to eat, like cornbread and beans and slaw. I mean, like all these good vegetables and sweet potatoes, all these things that people grew in their garden.
Hmm.
He'd say stay away from that grocery store food. That
Okay.
don't do your body any good, and you'll end up graveyard dead. That was like one of his phrases. If you keep doing that, you're going to be graveyard dead. So yeah. And one year, three saw 3,000 people. I
That's
know.
incredible.
I know. People came from all over the South to see him. Super
Huh.
regional. Yeah.
So you spent 3 or 4 years just being essentially his apprentice, it sounds like.
Well, he wouldn't have called it that. And I
Okay.
was, of course, seeing clients myself, but
Okay.
I
Yeah.
was, right, I was still already seeing clients, but he just had this little bit different view.
Hmm.
And he also did what we might call astrology, but he didn't call astrology, which is the signs. So between my mother-in-law and him, I learned the signs and how to use the signs and, practice. Um, and so the signs is where you have the head, the neck, the chest, you have body parts and
Hmm.
then certain characteristics that go with those body parts.
Okay.
But if you look at the astrology charts, the head is Aries, the neck is Taurus.
Yeah.
So it was a type of astrology, but it was spoke astrology that that you was not used to predict anything. It was used for understanding personalities. It's like personality class and understanding only use the sun and the moon.
Hmm.
And so he would like look at the almanac and go, "Oh, the head, the sign is in the head." And
Hmm.
that meant the moon was in Aries.
Okay.
And there's going to be more headaches, sinus infections, teeth problems,
Okay.
earaches, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And often there were. I, it's amazing how that correlated.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. It's also interesting to me how folks were able to reconcile what seems to be decidedly non-Christian practices within that context. I don't
No,
know.
because the Bible says there will be signs in the sky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's actually two or three Bible verses that were used to,
To justify the
yeah, to
interesting.
justify that. Yeah.
Okay. So you spent a few years studying with him, and then what was next for you? You already had your client load. You're already getting some experience. Did you
Yeah.
pursue other education?
That's when I started working on my master's.
Hmm.
And, and when I started practicing, you could not make a living doing herbalism. Nobody would come to see if you charged
Right.
because it was considered a calling that you were given, so you couldn't charge for it. So I always had to work some other job, even if I had because I still had kids and a mortgage and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I was also always working in the same time. So I taught gymnastics. I was a real physical education person. I worked my way through college in the PE department, working on my bachelor's. I taught dance to little kids and and I taught aerobics for 20 years and personal trainer. But this was also good um, foundational work for an herbal practice, because
Yeah.
it really helps you discern what is musculoskeletal and what is organ. And, so it just blended in and fit really, really well. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. Would you say that your practice then has evolved in terms of, I mean, it must have as you've incorporated new knowledge, but
mhm.
do you feel like it has significantly colored or changed or shifted the way you practice, or is it still very much rooted in that early experience you had with like Tommie Bass and what you learned early in your tradition?
There is still a big aspect of that
Hmm.
rooted in there, and it probably will never go away because it was
Hmm.
so much a part of me from birth on,
Hmm.
in my
Hmm.
early years. And that kind of rootedness or what you learn when you're that young just doesn't go away. It's in there somewhere, right? Um, and so that is still there, but I've certainly moved more toward let me read your blood work,
Right.
what does your x-ray say?
Right.
So there is this clinical aspect that I also have shifted more into that I didn't have access to in the earlier days, but they blend well together.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've observed traveling to places like India and Nepal is that Ayurveda has become much more regulated and it's now taught in
Mhm.
university programs. And when I meet these physicians that have been trained in that way, they lack the kind of depth and complexity of understanding, but more just sort of embodied knowledge that
Mhm.
you got just by growing up and being around it. I feel like I struggle with that myself because, I didn't come from any tradition. I had to discover it for myself and find that tradition. So I'm just wondering if you're seeing some kind of shift in your tradition. Are there herbalists like you still practicing? Is it still a vibrant living tradition or
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, and even more so because I've trained a lot.
Ah,
I've trained a lot of herbalists, local herbalists and regional herbalists. And so, yeah, there's still some older people practicing, also, um, but very few. But yeah, it's still very vibrant. And um, I, I've probably trained 40 or 50 um, Southern folk herbalists. Yeah,
wow. And
myself.
so they're trained in this sort of folkloric tradition. So
Mhm.
you're not taking them through like a clinical training per se, but it's reminiscent of your own training. And what so
Similar.
mm,
Like I started in the woods when I was 10. I was running around the woods with the family when I was 6, but
hmm
it wasn't until I was about 10 that my grandmother was like, pay attention, get over
mm,
here, stop running around. This is what ginseng,
hmm
help dig this ginseng, and this is what pink root looks like. And so every year they would get a list of herbs to from a company in Chattanooga that bought herbs to dig. And that's what we went by. And we took this list. This is spigelia,
hmm
spigelia. This is whatever it happened to be. In the moment, mayapple was always golden seal and black cohosh, So when I was 10, it was like, here's the identification of the ones we're going to make money on because we're digging these to sell to pay the mortgage and the light bill. Right. Right.
right.
Right. And then here are the ones that we're going to gather for, you know, Granny's cupboard. So I call my grandmother Granny, Granny's cupboard. Right. So we have that. And so that's when I started about 10 and all that. And,
Wow.
it wasn't, I didn't learn mullein red clover. I didn't learn any of the naturalized herbs. I learned only native herbs.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it
So if they
wasn't
were,
until like I was in maybe my late 30s, early 40s, I was like, oh, that's mullein.
huh?
You know, so it's very native plant oriented.
And has it changed? I mean, some of those plants that you mentioned, like American ginseng and golden seal, they're considered to be, threatened species or species at risk. And formerly, you guys were just out there picking them, and there was sort of a natural abundance, but that's certainly not the case. Has
No,
that kind of,
that's false.
sorry, what is?
I said that's false.
What's false?
It's American ginseng is maybe at risk, but we export. Why I forgot how many uh, plant pounds of plants, like 34,000 or something pounds of American ginseng
Wow.
every year, or
And you,
more every year. And
wow.
so what is true is that we don't have a local market for it
Hmm,
because it all gets exported.
I see.
I'm a member of about 5 different ginseng foraging groups,
Okay.
and people are just like filling the top of their kitchen table with ginseng, wild ginseng they've gathered. And there's lots out there, but it's all going to Hong Kong or
Um,
Korea. And so we've been told not to use American ginseng while it's being exported for a lot of money.
I
Um,
see.
yeah, so it is at risk. I'm not going to say it's not at risk,
Hmm
but one of the things I like preach to my classes is we have to recover this tradition of American ginseng and find a way to limit the exportation of wild.
Right.
And I totally support woods grown, or where someone is woods wild simulated.
hmm
Yeah, let's have more of that, but less savor wild that's being
hmm
exported. Those 3, 4,000 pounds, that's a lot of plants,
hmm
because those are dried plants. And let's create a continental market for it because the plants are there. And if we don't create a market, it's going to keep getting sold to Hong Kong,
Right.
right? It's going to keep getting exported. So how do we get control? of
Yeah,
this
and then people lose
plant.
the personal tradition, the experience of using it, right? It just becomes
That's
another
right.
commodity.
That's right. So that's one of the things that I work at least locally and with foraging groups,
Hmm.
is how do we create a wild, ethically wildcrafted American ginseng market for us? Because most herbalists do not know how to use American ginseng. Because, and it was my first plant, right?
Well, maybe I can ask you then, like, what do you think of that herb? Like, what do you use it for? What are its primary indications, and how do you prescribe it?
All right. So it is considered an adaptogen, kind
Hmm.
of in the modern vocabulary of, of studies and adaptogens. Um, s- it would be for recovery after heart attack.
Hmm.
That was the
Okay,
primary use,
interesting.
you know? So if you've had a heart attack, a little bit of American ginseng on a regular basis would could help keep you from getting another heart attack,
Okay.
or it might help prevent you from having a heart attack. So, heart circulation, kind of top of the indications for it.
Hmm.
Energy, stamina,
Hmm.
um, top of the list. Build muscle.
Hmm.
So um, I would say oxygenate the body,
Hmm.
because you can breathe deeper. Lungs,
Hmm.
digestive aid, top of the list, move the gallbladder, empty the liver is
Hmm.
one of the first things I was taught to do with it, and it will do it.
Interesting. Despite
Yeah,
not being a very bitter herb.
well, it is sweet and then bitter underlying, but it
Yeah.
will totally move the gallbladder.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
And it will do it in a non-harsh way. And then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I feel so, my digestion is and feels light. How this is, oh wow. It supports liver function also, and was used for, I'm trying to think how to say this. In my day, it was called rot gut,
Okay. Yeah. I
rot
think we all know what
gut.
that means.
Right? You could use it for rot gut.
Okay.
Right. And so it was like a low thyroid because there was a lot of thyroid problems in my youth.
Hmm.
Because people just didn't use iodized salt. I mean, I would go to church when I was little and just see giant garters hanging down people's necks, women's necks, especially after the second baby. It was used to support the thyroid,
Hmm.
and you could take it even if you're breastfeeding. So it was a holism. It was for the whole body. Yeah, it
And
could help your brain. Uh-huh.
when you say thyroid, is it primarily just for like more
Hypo,
hypometabolic conditions?
yeah. For people who had uh, blood sugar, high blood sugar,
Okay.
it would might be in a formula. And it was a potentiator. So in traditional Southern folk medicine formulas, because we did have formulas, some people think we only did simples, but no, we had formulas.
Hmm.
Usually only 4 herbs in the formula, maybe 5, but we had a potentiator in the formula. And cayenne was a potentiator,
Hmm.
right? Lobelia,
Hmm. Hmm.
potentiator. American ginseng, a potentiator. Wild
Interesting.
ginger, a potentiator. So it was it was an herb that helped formulas work better. So it might be the last herb in a formula. Um, Things like that.
Any contraindications for it? Like, or it seems like it's kind of a panacea in your tradition.
Yeah, it is a panacea. I don't know of any contraindications. I mean, it would even help support a healthy fever.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so even being sick, and with fever didn't exclude that. I mean, I started eating ginseng when I was like 5 or 6. My
Well,
daddy was like, "Here, have a bite," because we just nibbled on it, right?
right.
So I've eaten ginseng my whole life, you know, literally my whole life.
Wow, that's yeah. I mean, I don't know so much from the your tradition. I'm informed a little bit by the Chinese tradition. Of course, it's not indigenous to the Chinese system. It's described as more of a cooling ginseng, which makes it maybe a little more adaptable or flexible because it's got these adaptogenic, troph restorative properties, but also maybe it doesn't induce too much heat in the body at the same time.
Right. I would agree with that as opposed to like Korean red.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is warmer or
Yes.
brings more stimulating activity to the body. Yeah. I interestingly, I was a keynote speaker at a ginseng conference once, and about half the audience were Asian that they had come to, because it was like an international forum, but I think it was in DC. It was outside of DC. So anyway, one of the things, one of the Korean people that were in the audience told me at the break, he was said American ginseng was highly sought by mothers
Hmm.
who would make I guess a tea and put
Hmm.
it in babies' bottles so to make them smarter.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was like babies with bottle were getting American ginseng. They would go down to the market and buy the ginseng because they believed it would make their baby smarter. Yeah.
All right, there's nothing a mama's not going
I'm
to do
not
to
going
help
to
her
argue
baby.
with that,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Yeah. I
yeah.
think about, I think the country could use a little more ginseng right now.
But maybe that's your prescription for America is more
Yeah.
ginseng, more
You
American
just need
ginseng.
a little more ginseng. Open up those brain waves a little bit.
Yeah. I'm going to run out of time, but I want to ask you just one last question. For the tradition that you so wonderfully articulate, do you are there any challenges that you think it's facing right now or in the future? I mean, apart from, say, access to herbal medicines from, say, overharvesting, which you seem to have allayed some of my concerns over, but anything else about the way things are shaping up, in particular in the US for the practice of herbal medicine?
For my tradition in
Yeah.
particular, it seems to be kind of like more people want to know about it. So
Okay.
it's growing. Herbal medicine for the country, it's becoming uh, somewhat diluted.
Mm,
Um, and with conventional medicine and less integrated, I would like to see more integration and
mm,
less dilution, or, you know, um, and I would love to see more research. Here's the other side of my brain working. I would love to see more research, but there's just not any going on these days at all here
right.
in the States. The Middle East has got some great research.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and Asia, of course, is some really good research.
Hmm.
Even little kind of like Central Europe, you're getting some kind of like research coming out of Central Europe. Um, South America a little bit, but not much.
Hmm.
And in Brazil, they have a lot going on about, it's like here's all these plants, and the indigenous want to like, what, wait a minute, you're taking our plants, so there's a lot of strife going on between industry, um, cutting down the plants, people who want in a different industry, people who want herbal industry, and the people who want to keep the plants for the indigenous. So I'm kind of watching South America and Brazil to see how that comes out. And then we have something like maca out of the Andes, which, immediately somebody started growing someplace else,
Hmm.
which was also their livelihood.
Yeah.
So worldwide, there's a lot going on herbally as far as the industry is going, but
Hmm.
I think we're losing kind of traditional practitioners because it's now becoming diluted with this and diluted that. And, when people come to study with me, if they're not kind of like regional, if I have like somebody from New York or California, they've already studied 5 different traditions,
Right.
right before they come to. They've studied Ayurveda, they've
Hmm.
studied, I don't know, TCM, they've studied spiritual herbalism of some kind, that,
Hmm.
so they've studied all these things, and now they're going to come in, oh, I want to study Southern folk medicine. Well, they're just now kind of combining everything they've studied and into their own system, which is fine, but it also at the same time kind of reduces the tradition. So a lot of the tradition gets lost
Yeah.
in that.
Yep.
And, people kind of pick and choose what they want out of the tradition.
Right. And your last name is so informative, like of who you are. You're just this amazing light for this Southern Appalachian tradition that I think just goes unrecognized. People do they seek out inspiration from these other systems and failing to realize just the wealth of knowledge that people like you hold in this truly American tradition.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for agreeing to sit down with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I appreciate you getting in touch with me. It's been fun. It
Thank
was
you.
good seeing you again.
Good seeing you
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Thank you.